Right, so we're all good to go. Amy, do we have a quorum?
Yep.
Yes, we do. Thank you. So we're now on page 280, the information report from Paul, and there are a couple of things to be discussed. So over to you, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll take the report up, but of course, a few things to highlight. Obviously, in the last few weeks, there's been a couple of pieces of advocacy done in terms of Waka Kotahi. We're expecting to hear back from them after their board meeting, in which they're talking about Cape Palliser Road in August. Their board meetings this month. So I was hoping for some kind of update for you by today, but unfortunately it's not to be. So fingers crossed on there, and I'll just let you know through the email channels rather than waiting to any formal meeting. We'll then think about whatever the outcome is how we then message that back to the communities. But I'm quite sure that they'll be thinking about that themselves. One thing that I'm also aware of is that Tourism Wairarapa has also sent Waka Kotahi's board a similar kind of letter expressing the importance of Cape Palliser Road in terms of the tourism industry in the South Wairarapa. So yeah, so fingers crossed, and I'll let you know as soon as that's come about. Power Co is the other thing. I'm hoping that we haven't had any repeats of the.
We have. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
We've had grumpy residents again.
Mm-hmm. So I obviously sent the CEO an email, a letter, sorry, and I got back a very swift response, and they were putting in place regular reporting around performance of the supported network across the South Wairarapa. But clearly they haven't got that down to the root cause of what the issue is in Preston. So
Reporting started.
not yet. No. Another piece is really around, obviously, LGNZ conference was last week, and one of the key things there was around the future local government report and how that is progressed. There's 5 issues there: embedding local government's purpose and well-being, growing authentic Te-Tiriti-based partnerships, system renewal, strengthening local democracy and leadership, and increased funding. So just to add a little bit of substance to those, if councillors haven't had an opportunity to read the full report yet, I have got a copy here, should you wish to take it away, and some light bedtime reading. Embedding local government's purpose and well-being focus really is it comes down to one of the challenges I put before us at the recent LTP workshops, which is about understanding our place in the community and our purpose, with a particular focus on our well-beings. Growing authentic Te-Tiriti-based partnerships, it's how we embed Te-Tiriti in our day-to-day practices, and how we think about engaging authentically. System renewal is how we work differently. So this isn't necessarily from a point of view of talking about amalgamation. It's about how we work with one another in a more of an aligned way with aligned outcomes. Strengthening local democracy and leadership is around growing capability and purpose and direction within our local government environment. And increased funding is obviously give us more money. It isn't just from the point of view, of course, of central government funding, where, you know, that is a significant issue, but is what our other funding sources and how sustainable is our current funding model. And I think we would all agree that relying mainly on a rate pay based to fund our operations is not a sustainable way forward. Obviously, we had a public speaker today who was talking about the concepts of the future local government report, and you know, we did have an involvement. We were interviewed for part of this piece, and so I'm pleased as to how we've been able to represent that. The So we have got water services entities, the amendment bill and legislation before government, select committee. Sorry, the issues are of course around the elections, October, November. A signal back from Christopher Luxton last week was that, you know, if National are elected, they will look to appeal the water legislation within their first 100 days, which of course adds more uncertainty to our operating environment. So we're in a little bit of a holding pattern as far as that's concerned. So I will, as soon as more information comes to light, we will keep you abreast of that. I won't go into huge detail. I would like to spotlight one final piece, and you may have seen there on page 292 that we've started reporting on the number of Lagoimas we've been getting. We've had signals from certain members of certain more engaged and interactive members of our community of an intent to increase significantly the numbers of Lagoimas that they're intending to put into council during our LTP preparations. Already you'll see there from May to July, you know, we've jumped by 30 Lagoimas already been received. We've completed 40, you know, and we're still averaging around that 10-day average. And a big kudos to Amy in particular and Amanda in our ability to be able to turn those around in the governance team. But the reality is that this may become problematic for us, and you know, we want to meet those timelines. We are starting to be much more integrative when it comes to perceived vexatious requests. The under Local Government Official Information Act, vexatious requests are actually about the request and not about the requestor. So that is something that we do have to balance because we want to ensure that we're being as transparent as possible.
Can I just ask if the same names are coming up on Lagoimas on a regular basis?
Yes.
Thank you.
So last time we were going to talk about a bit more publicity around Lagoimas, if you remember, Amanda. And we were going to, in line with what Colin just asked then, actually say to the public, these people are causing these number of Lagoimas and this is the cost to council. Name and shame. Well, not so much name and shame, but advice, because a Lagoima is a public document. So it's not name and shaming. If you say X person has put in 30 Lagoimas every month, we should be doing that. We should be telling the public and say, this is what's going on. You know, because the public are concerned about the cost. And a hell of a lot of this information, be able to find it, because as you've rightly said, you direct them to a document or whatever. So the information is there.
Excuse me, could we legally do that, or is it?
Would you like to answer, Amanda?
Through you, Chair. So we have a draft policy for Lagoima release that Katie and Amy's pretty much written, with a little bit of input from Katie and Nikki. Amy and Nikki met with Simpson Grierson about a month ago now, and they gave us some legal guidance on the release of Lagoima. Lagoimas are between, like if the Deputy Mayor makes a Lagoima to council, that information is between herself and council. There is a section of the Act that gives councils legal protection, so that if the Deputy Mayor wanted to use that information to sue us, for example, she can't. So there's a legal protection. As soon as we proactively, that's what it's called, proactively release that information, we lose that legal protection. So there are some legal implications that we just need to be mindful of. Some of the advice that we got from Simpson Grierson is repetitive Lagoimas on the same issue. For example, if you're getting 10 Lagoimas on a particular topic, you know, maybe you should release the information that's being requested. Largely, our Lagoimas that I would say are coming from people who are asking us lots of questions. Most of that information is available on our website in minutes or agenda items or reports. It's just often they don't know that they don't know that it's available, or they're not sure where to find it. So we can just easily direct people to where that information is quite quickly.
It satisfies that
I
requirement.
assume some of those people have looked at every single page on the website, given the amount of Lagomas they've put in by now, so they probably know our website better than we do.
Yes, and recently I had a third request from a single person for the same information, and I essentially declined the request. Basically said, we've given you this information. We don't have anything else to add. A lot of Lagoimas ask us for why a decision was made. That's not information. So I can't give a reason why councillors or a community board made a particular decision 3 years ago or 5 years ago. That's a why is an opinion. And I often will just direct people and say, if you want to understand why a decision was made, talk to the elected officials. So that's a bit of but we are very much on the path of proactive release. That will be a policy to come to you at a future date for approval.
About the name of the person.
Can you answer that, Amy?
The releases that I've seen, and I believe is that you would only identify them as a private individual. When it comes to media, or, if you can ask an individual, like if they're a researcher or something like that, then their name will be published, or their organisation would be published.
Sorry, councillor. With regards to the Lagoimas, there's the ability to charge
Yes.
people requesting that information. Has there been consideration to go down that path, or perhaps to do a bit of an assessment to understand, to work out, what the hourly or the amount of hours that council staff are going to have to put into that request, and then perhaps go back to that person requesting the information to give them a heads up to say, this is going to take 5 hours work and we'll charge this much.
So, for you, Chair. So absolutely, we've got a charging policy. It's in our fees and charges. What usually happens when we go back to somebody and say, this is going to cost XYZ dollars, they will change their request. So we haven't had to charge anyone. I think the other thing to be mindful of, as soon as we charge someone, there's a little bit of a tipping point about whether or not we then publish it. Because if we've given them that information and they've paid for it.
That's right, they probably own it.
Yeah, the Ombudsman has some really good guides on this kind of thing. And there's a very, very high threshold for what's described as vexatious Lagoimas. It's a very high threshold. And there's a very high threshold for charging as well. They don't like you charging.
So through Mr. Chair, I guess a closing comment here is what we want to do is avoid a repeat of where we were a couple of years ago, where we did a bit of analysis on one individual's Lagoimas. It was high level kind of calculations, and within an 18-month period, one individual was caused council in staff time into the region of about $35,000 just by doing Lagoimas throughout an 18-month period. So we do want to avoid that kind of situation becoming something which is, repeatable as we're heading into an LTP period.
Could perhaps, and I know you're talking about obviously, could we perhaps not publish, have a report, a sort of quarterly report on Lagoimas and say the top 5 requesters have now taken up staff time of 50 hours, and that's the cost to council for these 5 individuals, not naming the individuals, but say top 5 Lagoma requests, boom, 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 boom. So that people actually get an understanding, because people, people are obviously concerned about what's going on in governance, and we've had a lot of questions about, why is governance this way? But that's governance, isn't it? That's your bill. So, if it's costing you staff time of $150,000 a quarter, which I would imagine is probably not unreasonable given the amount of Lagoimas you're getting, we should publicise that and say these 5 people, not named, but the top 5 costing you, the ratepayer, $150,000 or whatever it is a quarter. No, what do you guys think?
Yes, I think that would be good information to
Hand up.
People are asking for the Lagoimas the same, but also complaining about the excessive spend council staff on various specific things.
Thank you.
I don't disagree with your idea. I wonder if, yeah,
But this would take.
I wonder if,
Another plaque.
I wonder if there is something else outside of Lagoimas that we could do or we are currently not doing that would help provide the information that people are asking for. Obviously, if people, well, obviously, most people that ask for a Lagoima have a legitimate and reason for doing so. They have a legitimate interest in the information that they perhaps feel that they haven't yet received. So-
Actually, a leap of faith.
But I wonder if there's another less costly way that we could be ensuring that we are providing that information.
Would you recommend that we seek such a report from the chief executive?
I don't want to unnecessarily burden the chief executive with any further reports, but I wonder if that's just
Well, we
thinking that we can
could leave the idea with them.
a mulling of.
Thanks
that.
very much. Okay, so I think we've talked about that for a while, and look, don't go away, Amanda, because I think resident perception survey as well.
Amanda's show, isn't it?
Can I, sorry, just before you move on to that, I just on Paul's report, on the CE's report, because,
Was it part of?
oh, sorry, okay, so I just have a couple of comments to make. Question.
Sorry, no, it was this is a separate item.
Oh, it was separate.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, Council.
That's all right. So Paul, I'm just reading through, which I previously read through, and as I said, I have to scroll down and then scroll up again. And so some of the key things, I guess, that on the horizon are, of course, the RMA reforms.
Yes.
And I just want to acknowledge we had 2 very meaningful workshops last week. And I want to thank your staff effectively for coming in and giving up their time, because the roading workshop to me was invaluable, and I'm sure that Aidan wouldn't.
Yeah.
And so others that attended. And Russell's workshop on RMA reform sent home some really quite strong signals, and poor old Russell had to condense it down because I had to go, and we only had 2 other councillors, I think Woody and Melissa were here. And I'd love to see Russell perhaps present again to a full council in terms of what we're facing in the way of challenges with RMA reform. But I just wanted through you, your worship, and to the CE on thanking those 2 staff members in particular that really went out of their way to present us with something that's really meaningful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right.
Hey, Martin. Oh,
Sorry.
sorry. Can I just, and before we move on to the next topic, through you, Mayor, Paul, you mentioned at the start about Wakatahi's board meeting this month. One of the points that I covered off in my chair's report for ICS last week, not that we got to the end of ICS meeting, was that I was asking if collectively and the elected members around the table could, we could write and then sign a letter to back up your communication to Wakatahi expressing concern from a South Wairarapa District Council perspective. And then I felt that if elected members were able to back up and support your letter as well as the other letters publicly that have gone through, that would be beneficial. And I know that we haven't covered that off in the ICS. Do you know when or what date the Wakatahi board are meeting? And I'm wondering if we can get a letter drafted up and signed by elected members.
Future. I'm afraid I don't know when the date is. I know it's not the back end of the month, but I can't be sure as to when it is. I think it's an excellent idea. I think from an operational perspective, I think they've got the message as to what it's doing or what are the risks to our ongoing sustainability, our financial position. One thing that councillors may wish to consider is what political pressure can be applied outside of Wakatahi. we are one of a few councils that have these roads of significance and are facing the very same challenge. And so I'm sure that they'll be thinking about it from the point of view of what the whole impact is if they were continue to funding these roads rather than on a district basis. So they may well be looking at it on a district basis, but I'm sure they'd have to justify separating them off. So I do feel that any political pressure through to the Minister of Transport, who is Kieran McAnulty, who is of course also our local government minister, who is also our.
Parker is.
Oh, has it moved on? Sorry, forgive me. So I guess my message is find the right recipient.
Very happy to keep on.
No, it is quite, isn't it?
Okay, and then residents' perception.
Thank you. This is something that we do annually as a result of the KPIs set in long-term plan that specifically say that the data will be collected through a resident survey. Last year, our contract came up for renewal with the provider and we went to market and we were able to find a alternative supplier who has given us a better financial benefit, offered more service for a little bit less money. So that was a good outcome. This is their draft report. It's not their final report. There's a couple of errors that we've noticed in it and some feedback that we'd like to give them before we publish the final report. You will see that largely most things have improved since the last resident survey, slightly. I think that governance took a nice a move, which I think is probably a reflection of having new elected members and the efforts that many of you have put in to be publicly available with our residents. You've got an updated version that includes which we'll update on the website as well, that includes key messages for the comms, who the key stakeholders are and our planned media activity.
Right, we'll open up to some discussion and who wishes to start? I would invite possibly one of the Featherston members to comment if I might, because whilst I regard the report overall as being positive district-wide and therefore something to be gratified by, I did notice that a number of the measures headed in the opposite direction for Featherston. Councillors would like.
I'd be happy to start. I think you've pointed out something which we may have all noticed and something that I've certainly seen commented on briefly online since the agenda pack came out. And I think that speaks to a whole raft of things that we see stagnating in Featherston, shall we say, and which are not new but continue to hurt residents. And I think the way forward and the way to see the Featherston results improve is to see some resolution to long-standing sore points, shall we call them. And I would hope that over the course of the coming year that we would start to address some of those things slowly but surely and see some of the same improvements and results in Featherston as we've seen perhaps in Greytown and others.
Councillor Rolls.
Yeah, I'd certainly endorse this view on life. And I have to say, you look at the demographics a little bit too, because if we look at Martinborough, for instance, as a destination population of Wellingtonians who like their homes here, and so they don't get a first-hand view of, I guess, what we've done. as a council. And it's probably very similar in Greytown to a large extent, although there's more of a resident population there. But, you know, they seem to be overall reasonably comfortable. Featherston's actually got a very stable population base that commutes to Wellington daily. They communicate with each other daily. They're on the train. They're doing a whole raft of things. And they have always been vocal about the performance of council, always, and the performance of other things as well, I might add, but council being one of the key things. I think for us to change that perception around Featherston, we've got to have tangible evidence that we're making progress. We really do. We have to lift our game with Featherston. We have to show that we as a council are committed to that community. Because if I go back a number of years, Featherston sort of fell off the perch a little bit with investment and with a whole raft of things. And we've got a huge amount of catch up to do there. Incrementally, we can do it and achieve it. And I think we've got some, if I dare say so, we've actually got some pretty good councillors there now. We've also got a very good, strong community board. And I think those people will assist us in changing the residents' perception of how we perform as a council. So I've had this.
Thank you, councillor. Now, anybody's hand up wishing to discuss more? Okay, in that case, what we will do is we will I'll move that we recommend the council receives the report. Do I have a seconder, please? Thanks, councillor Sadler-Potter. All in favour, please say aye. Thank you. And then I think we've got a noting recommendation. I wonder if it's possible to put a date beside that.
The final one usually aligns with our annual report, which is due in October, end of October.
Yes.
Have to be there.
Nothing is going to change in this particular survey report.
There's just a couple of little, for example, there's all the graphs are bar graphs, except one is a donut graph. So that needs to be corrected. And Sheila has noted a couple of things that she'd like to talk to the researchers about to get some feedback about the statements that they've made based on the data that they've said. So we do want to do a little bit of tweaking before we produce it finally. The numbers won't change, obviously.
Nevertheless, I pick up what I take to be Councillor Old's point. There's no reason to leave it to October. There may be some editorial changes.
We'll do it as soon as we can.
Okay.
I don't know because I'm reliant on another body doing the work.
Yes, I understand.
Yeah.
But they'll want to be paid, so they'll have an incentive to cooperate, I'm sure.
The mistake we made, obviously, was not presenting our residents with the residents' perception survey until earlier this year.
Yep.
To be quite honest, and that was a huge letdown.
Yep.
I think if we're over
This is a public document as
of now,
okay. It's a draft is
well, it's on the agenda. That's right. Yeah.
It's already been.
Okay, no, fine.
final copy will align usually with the.
That's great.
Okay, so Councillor Ealams.
Yeah, Martin, I'd just like to say thanks to the staff for putting this out. Firstly, to councillors, whether it was a week or 2 weeks ago, for us to get our heads around it and their heads up, and also secondly to putting it on, added to the agenda, so it is now out in the public arena at this time. So we're not going to be having a repeat of last year's perception survey. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, do I have someone to move the noting recommendation? I do. Councillor Bosley, a seconder, please. Councillor Macaulay, all in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Excellent. So I think the next thing is committees of the whole, is that correct? Yes. Let me just do a little double check.
Yes, options.
Action.
For alternative committee structure. So I suspect, Amanda, you're not moving anywhere soon. So
Amanda show.
yes, indeed.
All about.
I haven't got Stella working, so I'm having to work through the agenda page by page. Scroll.
So I could lend you mine possibly. So look, I will move that we receive the committee of the whole report. Do I have a seconder? I do. Councillor Macaulay. And now we'll open it up for discussion and possibly invite you and Linda to.
I don't know if I've got anything to say really. It was a request that came through from elected members to have a bit of a description of what committees of the whole are. I thought it's what I also included the guide that LGNZ on committee structure, because it's often helpful to see what it is you're comparing it with. The information is basically pulled straight from that report. I think some consideration would need to be given to, we would need to change our terms of reference for our committees, which would require a resolution by council, and a draft of terms of reference to be created. And if meeting schedules were going to change, they were set back in December last year, we need to change that meeting schedule by a resolution. Normally that would be done in the last meeting of council for the next 12 months. Anyway, the calendar, that is.
Right, thank you. Discussion from councillors. Thank you, councillor.
So I've got a number of questions, Amanda, and if everyone's happy for me to go through them. Firstly, Amanda, how do you establish a committee of the whole first?
You'd need to do that with the terms of reference and a resolution by council.
Okay, and then in terms of the committee of the whole from council, so my understanding is you do sort of 3 recommendations. One, you do a recommendation to establish it.
Yep.
Ready? 2, you would then vote for all business of council to be referred to the committee of the whole.
So that would be described in the terms of reference.
And thirdly, you would have to pass a resolution then that all recommendations from the committee of the whole that come back to council get adopted without discussion.
So one of the advantages that's described in the report is that you can find yourself relitigating things that you've already decided. So, and this fits nicely with the conversation that you were having before about the use of a casting vote. So if you've got something that everyone agrees with, why would you relitigate it at council?
So we could pass that resolution, say, if we've stated it in the council of the whole and the resolution is, it can be automatically adopted as of council. Okay, now there are 3 things that council cannot devolve, and that's annual plan, long-term plan.
Yep.
The rates issue, and there's one other, isn't there?
Rates are set as part of the annual plan and long-term plan.
Long-term plan.
There's a number of bylaws and policies that have to come to council as well.
And the overall management, sorry, Mr. Chair, and it's the management and performance of the chief executive.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Okay, so then assuming you establish a committee of the whole, and that committee of the whole then establish subcommittees or working groups or panels.
Yes.
Okay, and then the committee of the whole appoints councillors to those. So on and so forth.
Yes.
Cool. So those are my questions.
Thank you. Anyone with a follow-up?
One
Yeah.
other question. In terms of the committee of the whole, the management of the committee of the whole, or the governance of the committee of the committee of the whole appoints its own chair. Is that correct?
Yes.
Cool.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the questions.
You have I'm sorry, I haven't read this document.
Okay.
Apologies.
Sorry, I sent it through last night.
Yeah,
and I
forgive me,
really
it was requested last Tuesday. Yeah, it was requested last Tuesday. So
So I have
For information, there's no decision.
is there a pros and cons?
So there's
Advantages and disadvantages.
there is on strength. Yeah, so on the second page, there's that table and it says challenges, and so these are the challenges and these are the possible solutions. The advantages are just before that and the points.
So page 3, yep, okay. So can we have some, I guess, we're not making a decision today, are we? This is for,
Just for information.
okay, thank you.
Thanks very much.
I'd just like to thank you for making the time,
Yeah,
given the short notice you were given.
Well done.
So thank you for doing this.
Okay.
There's a lot of move today, it's a lot of.
yes, well,
Yes,
feeling it.
gratitude.
Right, okay, thank you very much for that. Well, in that case, put the recommendation that we received the committee of the whole report, or vote, please say aye.
Aye.
And no, he knows. And I think that brings us to action items.
Yeah.
One way towards the.
We're on the home. So,
Final report in
It should be. Three, 393.
Want to go to the next, bring it up.
I'll do you, Mr. Chair. We've obviously got the action items, so if you're ready to go through these. Item 739, I'm going to ask Mr. O'Leary to talk to this. One of the issues that that council's identified that you'd require an update on, which he has emailed to everybody. Russell, would you mind joining me up here and talking to these points, please?
Afternoon, councillors.
Kia ora.
So you may recall at the last council meeting, the topic of the mix of composition and the councillor makeup of newish councillors and old, and the newer councillors not having a full background as to action item 735. So requirement for a update report.
Yeah.
And so I've captured that in terms of background, context, and latest state of play. There is an element of repetition because there is already capture within the action notes of how things have tracked in terms of trying to secure sale and purchase happening for this 7,000 metre squares section of unformed road. So you have the copies, Amy, they've been handed out.
And this is being tabled as another information. It has been circulated already.
It's yet to be circulated.
Oh,
by
forgive me.
councillors. So
Sorry, Russell.
this is a update report for you to take away with you, then I'll send it out through email. So it tracks the history of the matter in terms of council resolution back to 10th of February 21. Previous council agreed to sell and transfer the section of unformed road reserve, which is part of Hickson Street, but contained within the property of 185 Boundary Road, Featherstone. Captures that there's a couple of paragraphs captures the amount involved as part of the resolution, and that the purchaser was to pay for the associated costs in terms of the transaction. Second paragraph there is to duly note that on the site at 185, there is a house and large shed which are within the area of the subject unformed road reserve. And this is in terms of source point, how the matter really came to needing resolution. So again, 10th of February, the resolution was made by the previous council, and all through 21, we had sought some action from the purchaser that unfortunately had not happened. March through to June in 22, we get into the next year, including emails, letters and meetings face-to-face with the respective purchaser. July to August, further request for payment. Rechecking of matters with roading, because this is a topic that is essentially one of roading and property transition. An unneeded road, realisation that the conveyancing agreement for sale and purchase needed to be actioned, and lawyers to interact to make that happen. Fifth bullet point there in the list. Brandon's property lawyers had to be engaged. We couldn't use Hazelton Law because they're not property experts, so had to go out and get respective property lawyers to do the work for us. And that second to last bullet point, the large one there is noting the latest correspondence that went out. In the meantime, the prospective purchaser's solicitor had died. We had to wait till he advised our solicitor as to who his new solicitor is. That was done. So we have our solicitor acting for us to try and get that settlement signed. And in the recent interface that's happened, the opportunity has been taken to convey to and clarify points raised by the purchaser that it is their responsibility to have done their due diligence when they've applied for building consent land, and that as part of due diligence and supplying accurate plan information, that's their side of things that they should have done. So we have sent that message back, and we've also asked for the payment to try and get the settlement. So that is what's happened of late, and also an accompanying message within the email from our lawyer at Brandon's back to the new lawyer for the party that council is not prepared to be an unsecured creditor for money still owing after a settlement. The purchaser hoping that we would be somewhat lenient in that way, and that the other imparted message was our lawyer further noted to the purchaser that they have had since 2021 to start setting aside funds to pay the purchase price, which has always been a clear amount. So that, councillors, has been a background capture and context setting, capture related factors, and where it is at the moment. Sorry if it's a repetition of some of the elements in the action list, but it's that crossover.
Do they want to own it or don't
Who
they?
started the process? Did we or
They did, didn't they?
Well,
I thought they did.
Yeah,
it was part of us trying to problem solve with them and trying to get a way forward. But they certainly had in the early days indicated that they would like to purchase.
So do they still want it? Are they still going to pay for it, or are they going to just say, we don't want it any longer?
Well, I think the last points, which I didn't mention, is their capacity for discount in terms of, we've had a building consent. We've got buildings within that portion of road, and we've just maintained our line as to this is the amount, and you can pay associated fees. In the early part, we were interfacing and being respectful and kind and saying we understand your financial plight and that, but we've moved well on since then.
Fair enough.
So how did they end up building in a paper road in the first place?
They've made application for building consent.
But I thought paper roads are supposed to be non-build on, that they're technically council land. So how were they allowed to put a building right in the middle of it in the first place?
Unformed road, and the Building Act is pretty specific as to issues that it looks at, and that isn't one of those issues.
So is it our fault? Like,
Was it an accident? Was it?
Well,
Unaware that it's.
as I note towards the end there,
Yeah.
the accuracy of the plans presented and the awareness and due diligence of what's on the land is the property owners. The accuracy of the plans that accompanies an application is the responsibility of the applicant.
Okay.
So, and that has been captured to clarify and capture as part of messaging back to the new lawyer from our lawyer.
Have we changed our policy to make sure that from now on, before someone builds, this sort of thing can't happen again, or? Because I see this, when I first seen this come up quite a while ago now, when we were in council, I couldn't believe how cheap it was for them to purchase that land, thinking that once they own that land, they can then actually go and subdivide that land.
I just like to make
Quite a bit of money.
Sorry, Woody.
we're talking about the personal circumstances of an individual. And I think we should be in public excluded for this conversation. We are talking about a member of the public, and we're raising issues that potentially are private and confidential.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree.
So what do you,
That's right now.
so could I suggest we just adjourn this particular topic and it get taken out of this register, put into a public excluded register, and then we talk this issue further, because there's going to be other questions.
Is there a lot to be gained by that when this item has been on agendas since 2021?
It's coming to the, but I certainly wasn't privy to it, and probably Colin wasn't. And I would suspect that maybe we need to, if we're going to talk about whatever the next steps may be, may well get into that issue of confidentiality. Cool.
I view it as we should.
Sorry.
We can reintroduce it.
But you're right. Not to get, moon, oh, well, the moon tried to stop the whole. Literally, nothing. This is the classic. Yeah, I said, hey, you want to bring this and solve. Yeah, we need to prepare.
So I've just had consultation with Paul, as you can tell. The request for information was purely a request for information which has been provided. This is not the appropriate time to carry on and discuss solutions, etc. And what I've just been discussing with Paul is that we, in fact, come back at the next council meeting with, in fact, a paper that does take us into that realm, and we will indeed discuss it that right. So thank you for that. So the next item.
So can I just
yes,
clarify?
yes, please.
The action is for paper to come to council on.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
On resolution.
Sorry, just for clarity, the reason for this is because this was an information paper. If there is a change, which Russell has done what we've asked him to do. Yeah, is if there is a change of direction that or a resolution sort, then it needs to be positioned differently, and that would be in then publicly excluded.
I just think some information that's been presented to us that we weren't privy to before, and just for the sake of privacy for some people, and
Are you comfortable with that, Russell?
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. Okay,
Perfect.
thank you.
So 420.
Thank you. You may as well stay there, Russell, because I'll need you again in a minute. Oh, sorry. So the 420 is the roading asset management planning. That's still being planned as part of our wider asset management planning. So don't have any current updates. We are making some really good headway on our asset management planning. So I just want to raise that, but I ask that it remains on the actions for the time being.
537.
537 is still an open item. Russell, this is distribute information on infill design guides with a view to a future decision report being presented to council. And the last thing of any real issue, if you've got, I can share it with you.
No, that's right. I can answer that.
Oh,
now.
fabulous. Okay.
Where does that topic sit? As Councillor Plummer may note, it sits within the body of work for the district plan review. We've prompted the importance of production of urban design guidelines for physical results for the towns in terms of amenity and design, and that is still yet to come. So we keep pushing on that to say, please produce them, Bothwell Muskell, and they are not as yet produced, but we keep prompting on that. So that's my little synopsis.
Right, so the next one is regarding the dog pound, and it says at the very end, action proposed, project completed. Can I suggest it not reappear in the action items? Thank you.
Then it will be actioned again. Yes, thank you. So
Very nice. And the next one is 137, workshop to discuss the future of the housing of pensioners. Can I assume that we will probably do that as the long term?
that's what I've scribbled. Yes. Yep.
227, Greytown Community Board to update on the relocation of the information centre.
So this is a discussion point that I've spoken to a couple of council about, Councillor Bosley, Councillor Sadler of late, around the use of council on property in general. Again, that rather than dealing with individual instances of use of buildings, it needs to have a wider discussion part of our ongoing use. Again, another LTP, probably an LTP discussion.
259.
So could I just put some background to that, because that came up when I was on the community board. I'm not sure if you've got the background to it. But it was very much because Greytown, or what it is in Featherston, but the Greytown, the information centre is an empty office or just pamphlets. And so the community thought actually provide information, it's always better to talk to a person. And that's why Copplestone sort of came in on the conversation and said, well, we're open all the time, and we've got somebody on the front desk and we know everything about Greytown because we're our museum. So it just seemed to be that's what they were talking about, as opposed to anything about the use of council buildings or whatever. It was about practicality, about how can you provide a better service for visitors.
Sorry to you, Mr. Chair. It actually fits in very nicely to one of the items though that we're going publicly excluded around corporate accommodation and wider building use, I guess, and representation within the community.
Yeah.
That
was just background of how it came up.
39?
Yes.
Oh no, sorry, 259.
Yeah.
Amanda? Sorry. Just get your name by it. Greytown Sports and Leisure working with council officers on a paper to circulate with council elected members. They've noted removal of the budget from the AP process. So
I believe Alistair was going to meet with them.
So they have submitted the paper. The Greytown Sport and Leisure submitted the paper before the annual plan. I understand James and Stefan have been having conversations with them about that paper. I haven't seen a copy of the paper yet, not officially. It's due to come to council probably reasonably soon. But again, it's a paper about not so much Greytown Sport and Leisure, but how do we do and fund sport and leisure across the Wairarapa, and whether Greytown Sport and Leisure is a model that we can expand to provide those services. So they were made very, very clear right from day one that it was always, if they wanted to have council funding, it had to be South Wairarapa wide as opposed to a town on its own.
So just further to that, Woody and I met with Rosie a month ago, Woody, and then talked to them about that, and she's going to have to talk to, I think Mercy, she's going to speak to you as well.
Yeah, I haven't heard from Rosie yet, but you're.
About incorporating Besant and Master and Barbara into that paper to come back to us. And so she's aware of that and working on that.
I know Greytown Sport and Leisure have been working with Wellington Regional Sport, whatever their name is, about the preparation of this paper, how to expand this. And Wellington Sports sees it as a very good model for encouraging participation and use of grounds and so on and so forth.
So just don't reinvent the wheel, because we've been there and tried that a number of years ago. In fact, we allocated some $30,000 or $50,000 to integrating Greytown Sport and Leisure across the model across the district. So historically it's been done. It wasn't successful at the time, but there is papers, there's information available on the scope. In fact, Paora Munston was appointed as the facilitator for those for Greytown Sport and Leisure to adopt that model across district wide. Didn't work.
Thank you. Amanda?
Through you, Chair. I wonder if it shouldn't be my name on there. It might be better if it's Stefan's name on that action, only because I have had very little to do with what's going on. It tends to be other people. And the reason it ended up with my name against it, I think, was because of the intention of a funding agreement. And it's got beyond a funding agreement.
Angela had more discussion with James than she has with.
I believe James and Stefan.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
and yourselves, I've spoken to her once.
I'm sure Amy can note that.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we come on to pedestrian lighting, and now this was brought up at the recent ICS meeting. Is there anything more that needs to be added since then? No, I don't think so. Now we come to open waterway safety in the district. This is 45. We are waiting confirmation as to whether a review of safety of races in public areas is within the scope of WWL's management of the resource.
This is an issue for the around water reform question as well, Mr. Mayor. What's in the remit of the new entities versus what's not. So it is that latest update, but there is obviously an implication for reform as well.
Yes,
This one-
it's skeptical about that, but ask you.
This one came about when Woody and I were talking to some owners of properties in a recently done development on, what's the street called, Woody? Barley Ave. And when we went out back, we noticed that the depth of the open drains was quite, that's probably 1.5 meters deep, isn't it? And meter anyway. Yeah, and it's completely open. So I'm thinking, and so we just raised this issue about whether there is something we need to think about, particularly with open drains and so on.
I think this is a public safety issue, particularly a safety of children issue. And I don't think it's particularly important at this time to involve Wellington Water. Surely the important thing here is to get some sort of assessment from a safety expert, of which the world appears to have plenty these days, on their assessment of the danger represented not only by the Barley Avenue drain, but a number of others as well.
It may also be an issue for the district plan, Russell, that when developments are occurring, so greenfield developments with open drains, maybe there may be some issues about protection for them going forward if we're going to have drains that are 1 meter deep in town. I would suspect that's a hazard, and maybe that's something the district plan might want to look at.
Yeah, it's a bit of a fine point. Reality here is that the example at hand is example of a structure plan associated with the new growth area, which was sanctioned by council. So the importance of the accuracy within compiling and having the right structure plan for within an area and factoring in risk considerations, yes. So yeah, it's certainly a learning exercise.
So could I say land or public land?
What was that?
Is it on privately owned land or it's public land? Yeah.
This is my issue on. You want to be safe, you got to be careful too, like as kids, we played in all those water races that are in town, caught our callies and our eels and had fun. So my kids have done the same, and they sometimes do stop and do the same with their mates and other young kids around town. I think the bigger worrying issue is looking at when developments are done, these drains should be piped as they are all under town, all over the place. One, to stop the hassles of having to clean them and maintain them. And it should be done at the developer's cost when they put these developments in, which then takes away the.
That's what should be in the district plan.
And because now with the cleaning being on council, that one being left on council land, it's up to council now to clean it, which is our ratepayers, not the landowner that's right beside. And it comes to with traffic management plans and the like nowadays, it's not as simple as it's in the middle of the paddock.
If I can come back to the issue though, the issue is children's safety due to open waterways in the town. And whilst I think these other things are all important, and I know that they're being dealt with, at this stage, the important thing surely is to get that report so that we have an understanding of what risk is. And could I urge some urgency there, please?
Yes, we'll have it as a report for the next.
Thank you.
Would you like it at the next infrastructure community services meeting or the next
Yeah, I think
council
that would be
meeting?
useful.
Next ICS meeting.
Yes, would be good.
Yep.
Yeah. Number 47. So this is Greytown Rugby Club lease arrangements. on the 2nd of the 8th, officers were expecting to have an agreement.
So yes, I mean, this was just entered today, so
Right,
we're
okay.
expecting to have an agreement in place for the next few weeks for the grounds and facilities.
Very much. And then we come to 266, which is freedom camping.
Which is the last resolution, and that's underway now. So that's an action plan that's underway.
Okay, my thanks to you for those action points. I think that brings us to the mayor's report. So I wish to table the mayor's report as circulated, but minus, which I had just here a minute ago. There's so much paper come my way today.
Another rainforest this fall.
Another rain.
Yeah, that's what.
See here somewhere. Got a copy there?
Basically, it's everything, point from point.
Here we go. Yeah. So I wish to table the report as circulated minus paragraphs 2, recommendations 2, 3, and 4, and also minus paragraphs 3, 4, and 5, which leaves us with the single issue to discuss, which is the Wellington Regional Leadership Committee. And so the purpose of this report, therefore, is to update on activities and issues, in terms of reference for the Wellington Regional Leadership Committee. So I will move that the report as amended be accepted. Any seconder? Thank you, Councillor Elams. And so we'll now move to a broad discussion. And Russell, I think you've been instrumental in some of the text, so take us away.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just before I start talking further, in terms of due process, I'd like to introduce two councillors, Kim Kelly, who has the big responsibility of shaping forward and getting on the Wellington Regional Leadership Committee, and the Future Development Strategy, the FDS, which follows on from the original growth rate of the Wellington region. Kim, even today, is popping into the different councils to see how the potential signing of the agreement is going. So, and so what we have before us is 7 recommendations, key component recommendations that the Wellington Regional Leadership Committee continues as a joint committee, but with amended terms as a result of recent work and refinement. Particularly that other points to note are that for council, it authorises the mayor to sign the amended Wellington Regional Leadership Committee joint committee agreement on behalf of the council, and Mayor Martin has had his head in that space. And the last point, number 7, that the council appoints 1 member. Within the mayor's report, we do not have that member as yet named, so we're looking for council to find a member to be a member of the joint committee subcommittee, the FDS, for dealing with submissions and having a function in that space. We have Kim here who can give further overview and answer questions as they arise.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for joining us, Kim. And at some point of the day, in fact, we did get a volunteer for recommendation 10, which unless Rebecca's changed her mind, but he hasn't. So thank you very much for that. Kim, is there anything you wish to add?
I was going to make the point that it would be great if you could appoint someone today. So, yes, and the reason for that, at the moment, the plan is on the 19th of September. The leadership committee will get the draft future development strategy, of which up to a few times was sign off. But that requires two things. One is that all the councils sign off this updated agreement. So you are the second council, Hutt City were the first last week and they signed it off. Going to Masterton soon and then Upper Hutt, so take good. And at that same meeting on the 19th of September, they'll be appointing the hearings subcommittee, which is what the summon today. And the other thing I just wanted to say is there has been, on the since you've got, there has been some minor wording changes in the remuneration section on the subcommittee. Just to clarify that iwi members and an independent chair, if one is needed, although I'm hoping it won't be, will be paid to be on the hearings committee, but local government members at subcommittee without whatever you want arrangement.
Now, I'm very conscious that you gave a very full and excellent summary of the context here not so long ago. I know that not everybody was involved, but I certainly believe those of us who were here were very relaxed with those made good sense. But I just because it's possibly more in this area than some others. Councillor Plummer, any thoughts, observations, comments?
No, not at all. I'm comfortable with this. It's been going on for a while. I'm very comfortable.
Fair comment.
Would you like my comment who should be our rep?
Well, we've got a volunteer, so.
Yeah, good on you.
Yeah, good point. I'm convinced that Rebecca is very steadfast and reliable.
Absolutely.
Let's do that. Any other comments from anyone? Okay, well, in that case, we'll put the vote that the report received. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And then we will look at recommendations 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And in the case of 10, we'll just amend it slightly to appoint Councillor Gray to be a member of the joint committee. Okay. Do I have a mover for those? Thank you, Councillor Melissa Sadler. Thank you, Councillor McFawley. Any comments? Okay, all in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Against, there being none. You voting against?
2 seconds to quit.
Good for you. Okay,
I have a point.
you have a point.
Yeah.
Come on, you've won, Russell. You've
Yeah,
not,
no, just-
you want something more.
Just in terms of your prompt to councillors, in terms of Kim's last presentation, I'm just thinking, because the topic's going to be around for future years, I'm just checking as to whether that PowerPoint presentation has already been circulated, but if not, it needs to be sent out to councillors for ongoing awareness.
This will be on Stella.
Paul, I think you circulated it.
I believe I circulated it.
Yeah, I'm sure it came out.
Yeah. I think everything that gets recorded gets kept. Well, it might be.
I sent it out separately.
But I can
No.
send it to me, I can load it in the platform.
I did email it out to council.
Yeah, with it.
Just before we finish that one, can I congratulate Kim on being resourceful enough to spend a whole day sitting through our meetings and do appreciate the fact that you did hang around. Yeah.
She was making sure.
Yeah. Good on her.
Right.
All those masters and things.
Thank you, Ken.
Well, I understand what you're saying there. I mean, maybe we should have kept it for 5 minutes longer to have justified the visit. But she is also visiting other councils in this part of the world. So I don't think we need to feel guilty. We're now going to come to the public excluded part of the meeting. So do you have to do something to the technology?
Sorry, before we move to that, can I just, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, can I please circle back to the paper that was presented earlier on the committees of the whole? I'm pretty keen to move that into a decision-making space rather than information gathering space. I'm just not 100% sure of the mechanism of how to do that. Do we need to table a resolution to have that at another meeting?
What's this question?
I'd seek the input of Amanda here. My feeling is that it's going to require a resolution and a paper with a proposal that's going to underpin what the wider committee approach would be. Amanda, thoughts?
So the simplest thing probably would be to direct the CE, sorry, Paul, to produce a report that drafted terms of reference for the committee of the whole with a potential resolution for the setup of a committee of the whole, and we could work with whichever councillors. Notice of motion. Yeah.
May I recommend that if you are wishing to progress it, then it isn't something I think would be the expeditious, I'm looking for the word, but you get what I mean. To expedite the matter would probably be better done through co-design rather than it being just council officers bringing a proposal. So maybe a way forward would be that a paper is produced, but it's done on the basis of a draft terms of reference with a subgroup of a couple of nominate people of councillors working with council officers on the development of that terms of reference. That's probably the easiest and most expeditious way of doing this.
And that then gets a paper and a resolution that's driving in the direction.
Correct, to council.
Of councillors' determination.
Correct.
So we could do that outside, we don't need to decide.
We would.
Today, that can be done outside of.
It would become an action item. So we just simply have an action item to say that we will work with a couple of councillors who might be interested in working with us on this. And we would then bring that back to a council meeting with the draft terms of reference. So it'd be a case of identifying who amongst you would be interested in working with us.
Assuming councillor Gray would like to.
The hand up.
Big hand for there, yeah.
Yeah,
And I think,
possibly one or two others.
I think Alistair, councillor,
Sorry?
I think Alistair, councillor Plummer is obvious.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got nothing to do.
Thank you. Right.
Yes, we'll note that as an action item.
Right.
Okay, so now we're going to move into public excluded business. Do I have a mover, please, on that? I do, councillor Olds, councillor Sadler for seconds it. We're moving into public excluded. Reasons related to 7.2A. Sorry. 7.2 part 1, 7.2 part 1, 6A and B and 7.2 part A of the Local Government Act. The reasons, in order to protect the privacy of natural persons, the material that might be disclosed might be prejudicial to the maintenance of law, protection of offences, the right to a fair trial, and endanger the safety of the person. And the withholding of information is necessary to enable any local authority holding the information to carry on without prejudice or disadvantage negotiations, including commercial and industrial negotiations. All in favour, please say aye.
I didn't realise.